I'm Kurnal. Rawat. Our introduction was already done. I know this is the last session and we want to wrap it up and head for the award sessions. I'm sure a lot of you are gonna get awards. So I'll be quick, short, hopefully engaging. I am not from the out-of-home background, but I'm going to talk about brand and the power of design, how design can help create iconic brands, and of course, outdoor being one of the most amazing area of expression. But before that, let's start a game. I'm going to show some quick slides. It could be a sound, it could be an image, it could be words. Just whichever brand comes in your mind on each slide, please shout out. It's just a fun exercise, but we'll get to it why I'm showing you this. So please engage. Great. Great. Yes. Amazing. So, what do all these brands have in common? When we talked about you guys recognize without really seeing the whole thing, you just saw a glimpse and you recognize what the brand is. They all have very well-crafted sacred brand assets. Now, that's what we talk about. When you have great assets, you can create iconic brands. As we know, we have been talking about the consumers are changing their demands from, of course, there is an aspect when they look at the brands, but they also look at the cultural side of it. The brands really need to create a narrative which creates meaningful connections between their brand assets. And I think the brands are not really leveraging their brand assets to its most powerful meaning or what it can really do. We know we've been surrounded by old formats of guidelines and rigid stuff where the brand becomes stifled and not really able to move around and do much. Those are the old brands, but there are brands who are really embracing this change and using their sacred brand asset and activating them in a more meaningful way and meaningful spaces where it really lives and the customer and connect with their customers. So, when we're talking about in this whole complex scenario at this moment, brands really need to invest in their most powerful brand assets and bring value. And like we all know, to create iconic brands, we think we need to all invest in creating or really sharpening your iconic brand assets. And what could be these assets be? It could be a brand color, it could be a logo, it could be just a typography we saw, a shape, a form, a voice, a ritual, or even images, the way you shoot things. They all can become your sacred brand assets. But when we start thinking about all this, how do we look through what lens? There are only two things which really matters for brands, and that is relevance and differences. When we talk relevance, we know our brand is the most powerful platform for action for us, and we need to make sure all our assets really work towards having the right meaningful connection we want people to think about us. And that changes. But also, we know we are working in a very competitive market. We have to be differentiated within the category. How can my assets help me stand out, differentiate from the category, differentiate from the competition? When I say low on relevance, this is an iconic brand, but does the face has to do anything with the customer who's buying a chicken? Not really. But this is, when you talk about high on relevance, when the product comes alive, when it starts speaking to you, it has more relevance. It connects to the customers. Visual like this, low differentiation. Anyone could say whatever brand this could be. But when you have a sacred asset, this is high on differentiation. So that's the intent when we start looking at when we creating sacred brand asset. How can we be relevant and differentiated when we start looking at it? And of course, today I'm going to talk through the lens of out-of-home, and this is my point of view. When we're looking at out-of-home as a communication, I'm not looking at technology, but just pure play communication. I personally think that there are three key objectives an out-of-home communication medium needs to do, which is simple, memorable, and engaging. I think that's the most, and as times are changing, it's simple. Now even more, people are all looking at their screens, how to get them up, and if they look up, how do your communication is memorable, and of course, if you can engage the customer, it'll be the best thing an out-of-home can do. I'm going to show you some examples which I think are really great within that, how they use secret brand assets and activate in out-of-home, and how is it relevant. So through the lens of secret brand assets, we talked about how do we use them in out-of-home. So let's start with, which I found just simply make simple idea, simple execution, help you achieve the messaging you really want to do. I don't think so it needs any copy. It doesn't need anything. This is the brand can be present, it can make it alive, it can really trigger imagination. Sometimes an identity can do much more than just to do a logo. It can really help you solve a problem, but without really saying too much. Sometimes you don't even need to show your product. Let the people imagine how a sacred brand can really activate and let people fill in the gaps and imagine. That's where the beauty of a good, powerful sacred asset is. Or own a ritual by simple assets which can own a ritual and a time of a day by activating your sacred assets as well. This is one of our work. And of course, you will see a lot of work today which are not all original, but I just wanted to give credit to whoever has done this. There are some really creative minds who have the work I'm showing, so all credit to them. Or even the sacred asset can start saying different narratives if it really, in a more meaningful way and a simplistic way, how you want to talk about your product and its features. And when talk about being memorable, there are some examples which I think are how can a brand be remembered in someone else's space. This is a great campaign by Pepsi and putting Pepsi in different brands like Burger King, McDonald's, or Wendy's Burger. But it's about how you put your brand in the spaces where people are thinking about it in a more smart and intellectual way. But of course, being simple. Or even own a weather or a season. Why can't we? By a simple creative idea. This is one of the award-winning outdoor of Polo Mint, a simple act of using a season, using an occasion, and making your brand relevant.
Maybe I didn't treat you.
Sorry, I wanted to show you this video because this is not an outdoor ad, but it is about an outdoor, how people can find your brand. This was done during COVID. Hope you like it.
Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have. Maybe I didn't love you quite as often as I could have. Little things I should have said and done, I just never took the time. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind.
Again, activating a secret asset, and that was done during COVID, and this is the 2.0 of the same idea into a print campaign. We're really owning the outdoor occasion and using the secret asset of their product itself and not a logo. Engaging, and I think this part is where we start getting responses from people. I think outdoor, if it starts giving response, it's really interesting, and this is a few examples. This is for a Lego. I think really taking advantage of spaces and communication, how you see your product in those outdoor spaces. This is a really good example of how you insert your product in something else. Or really own an occasion or a moment where you really want to trigger a appetite for something. This is for Guinness beer. Of course, we know Pool is the main integral part of bars, and how do you trigger your brand in those smaller micro moments. This is a really great example of activating a sacred brand asset. And of course, we know Economist is such a brilliant brand and doing really engaging with a simple minimalistic approach and really making an impact and setting a narrative as well. We already saw this, so I'm going to skip this. But like I said, how do we really go about when we talked about relevance and differentiation to create iconic brand? And we do have some kind of a tool framework which we do, which is looking at from low differences to high differences, low relevance to high relevance, and have these. So the lower area, which is the basic, the weak, the dangerous, are the ones which you really need to observe. But when you start looking at the conventional, rising, and extraordinary, where you start assessing your brand asset, which are really valued. So these are some of the aspects. We know that the basic ones we really need to reconstruct if they're not really well. Weak ones, how can we rethink? We can evaluate, make them better. Dangerous ones, we need to really think about really let them go. It could be a name, it could be a mascot, it could be a color which has due time, has lost its relevance, has lost its purpose, or created confusion. I remember we were naming Tata Motors car, and we had named Zika, and the Zika virus came out, and we had to abandon it, and we had to come up with a new name. There are lots of reasons it can affect your brand, so that's where we need to keep an eye. The conventional ones we need to leverage. They are the mandatory needed for the category. How can we be ownable, more sharper? The rising ones are the ones which are, you have started cultivating them. How can we make them sharper, make them more, and take them to the final extraordinary brand assets? So just to give you, this is how we usually map. Look at all your assets which you have, brand, your colors, your type, your photography style. Start mapping them through the lens of this grid. Then you will know which are the assets really powerful for you to activate. And of course, you can activate it anywhere in whichever form it is, out of home, digital, or print as well. So yeah, that's, and I wanted to show you part with the final 3 of them, which are my favorite, which I really love. 3 examples. This is from India, from O&M. I think this is one of the brilliant outdoor campaign. Still, it's old. You can see the PDA phone there. But I personally think this is the most simplest, memorable, and engaging, ticks all the boxes for a brilliant outdoor campaign for me. And this one, which is an award-winning one, which is really interesting, of KFC, which was, this is in Spain, KFC, which was next to IKEA, and nobody knew that KFC existed. So what did KFC do? They take over IKEA's sacred brand asset and communicated that we are next to IKEA. And it brilliantly worked. So sometimes also using other people's sacred asset can be advantage, but that's a great power of design. And lastly, this is the latest work, and I find this amazing, beautiful work from LV. This is the latest collection which they have launched, and the whole London and different cities, New York, have been taken over with the designer, larger-than-life installation in different places. Really beautiful and amazing. Activating, again, the whole collection, the idea of these colorful dots and bringing them to larger-than-life space. And lastly, I will leave you with one final sacred asset done by them. Thank you.